Everyone at Ridgeview Memorial thought she was just a nurse, quiet, forgettable, the kind of woman you walked past twice a day and never remembered seeing. Nobody knew that 6 years ago, she had pulled 3 men out of a burning transport under enemy fire. Nobody knew her hands had once held a rifle steadier than most held a pen. Tonight, a name would be spoken in a trauma bay that would end that silence forever. Before we get into it, welcome back to Silent Heroes. If you're new here, hit subscribe, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from tonight, and take a guess. What do you think she used to be? Now back to the story. Her name, as far as Ridgeview knew, was Grace Calder. 34 years old. Night shift ER nurse. Brown eyes that gave nothing away, a thin white scar above her left eyebrow she never explained, and hands that moved with a precision the younger nurses quietly envied but never questioned. She kept her hair pulled back tight. She kept her voice low. She had learned the fastest way to survive was to make herself small. For 4 years, she had worked the overnight shift at a mid-sized hospital in a mid-sized city, the kind of place with flickering fluorescent lights and a parking lot that never quite got repaved. She rented a 1-bedroom apartment under a name that was, technically, hers, just not the one she'd been given at birth. She paid her bills in cash when she could. She never let anyone take her photo. The reason was simple, and she never said it out loud. Grace Calder was a curtain. Behind it was someone the world believed was gone. The hospital's CEO, a man named Preston Wade, ran Ridgeview like a kingdom and himself like its only rightful king. He wore suits that cost more than most of the nursing staff's monthly rent, and he had a habit, a favorite, well-practiced habit, of humiliating people in front of others to remind them who was in charge. His favorite line, delivered with a thin smile, was always some version of the same sentence. "This isn't a battlefield, sweetheart. Try to keep up." He said it to Grace more than anyone else. He didn't know why it made her jaw tighten. He just liked that it did. There was one person at Ridgeview who saw past the curtain. Old Mr. Henley, a retired mechanic in room 214 who'd been in and out of the hospital for a failing heart, used to watch her check his 4-line with a stillness that unsettled him. "You've seen things," he told her once, quietly, no one else in the room. "I don't know what. But I know a soldier's hands when I see them." She didn't answer him. She just adjusted his blanket and turned off the light. He never forgot saying it. Neither did she. It was 2:47 in the morning when the doors of the ER blew open. Sirens first. Then shouting. A gurney crashed through, a paramedic screaming vitals nobody could quite hear over the noise. Gunshot wound, multiple trauma, BP dropping. Preston Wade, who almost never set foot in the ER at night, happened to be doing a surprise inspection, and inserted himself into the chaos immediately, barking orders that sounded confident and were almost entirely wrong. He called for a treatment that would have raised the patient's blood pressure at exactly the moment it needed to drop. Nobody corrected him. Nobody dared. Grace saw it in 4 seconds. Not the gunshot wound. The man's neck. Tracheal deviation. Distended jugular veins. Falling blood pressure paired with muffled heart sounds, a triad her mind catalogued before she'd even finished crossing the room. Tension pneumothorax. If nobody acted in the next 90 seconds, his heart would stop from the pressure alone, not from the bullet. Then the paramedic said something that stopped her cold. Found his ID. Says his name's Danny Reyes. Guy's got a unit tattoo. Dagger through a compass rose. Said something before he went under. Kept repeating a call sign. Ghost 6. Ghost 6, do you copy? The words hit the room like a detonation. Preston Wade turned, irritated by the pause. "Is there a problem, Calder?" She didn't answer right away. Ghost 6. Nobody outside a 12-person unit had ever used that name. Nobody living, she'd believed, still remembered to use it. Nurse Calder. Wade's voice sharpened, that public, performative edge sliding into his tone. "I asked you a question." She said nothing. Her hands, for the first time in 4 years, were shaking. Someone get me a straight answer, Wade snapped, glancing around the room for support that never came, or get her out of my ER. The old tremor in her hands, the one she'd trained herself to hide behind clipboards and careful movements, was still there. But something else was rising underneath it, older, steadier, and it was about to burn the tremor away completely. She stepped forward. 14-gauge needle. Second intercostal space, mid-clavicular line. Now. A resident froze, staring at her. Wait, you're not authorized to. He's dying, she said. Get me the needle. Wade's face went red. Who do you think you are? Grace Calder looked at him, and for the first time, her voice didn't waver at all. Get out of my way. Attention pneumothorax happens when air gets trapped in the chest cavity and has nowhere to go, building pressure with every breath until it crushes the heart and lungs from the outside. It is one of the few emergencies where seconds decide everything, and the fix, a needle driven into the second intercostal space to release the trapped air, sounds brutal but saves lives that would otherwise be lost in minutes. Doctors are trained for it. Very few nurses are given the authority to perform it alone. Grace didn't wait for authority. She'd done this before, in far worse light with far worse odds. Her spine had straightened. Her voice had dropped into something low and even. The tremor in her hands was gone, replaced by a stillness the room hadn't seen from her in 4 years. 14-gauge. Now, she said again, and this time a resident put it in her hand without arguing. She found the space by feel, angled the needle, and pushed. A hiss of trapped air escaped the chest. The monitor's alarm, which had been screaming, began to settle. Danny Reyes's blood pressure climbed back into a survivable range in front of 6 witnesses who would later swear they'd never seen anything like it. Wade stood frozen, humiliated in front of his own staff, in the one place he'd never expected to be wrong. You're finished, he said, voice shaking with rage rather than fear. Effective immediately, you're suspended. Get out of my hospital. Get out, B*TSH, before I call security myself. The room went silent. A few nurses actually gasped. Grace didn't move. No, she said. I am just done hiding. She turned back to her patient, checking his pulse, ignoring Wade completely, and the crowd of doctors and nurses who had gathered in the doorway didn't step in to stop her. For the first time in years, they stepped in front of Wade instead, forming a loose, unplanned wall between him and the gurney. Whispers spread fast. By the time security actually arrived, they found themselves oddly reluctant to touch her. By 4 o'clock that morning, 2 black SUVs pulled into the ambulance bay, followed by the unmistakable thunder of rotor blade. A Navy helicopter set down in the parking lot, scattering loose papers and startling the security guards who had gathered outside. A man in dress uniform stepped out first, silver oak leaves on his collar, a face lined by more than age. He walked straight past Wade like he wasn't there. Lieutenant Calder, he said. Or should I say, Commander? Wade blinked. Commander? She's a nurse. She was a combat medic and a decorated field officer, the man said, loud enough for the gathering crowd to hear clearly. 2 Purple Hearts. A bronze star with valor. She pulled Sergeant Danny Reyes and 2 other men out of a burning vehicle under direct fire, 6 years ago, on a mission most of you don't have clearance to hear about. We've been trying to find her for 18 months. Reyes wasn't just a patient tonight. He was the reason she disappeared. Wade's mouth opened, then closed. There must be some mistake. I run this facility. I have every right to. You had a nurse under your roof who saved a decorated serviceman's life tonight, the officer said, and your response was to threaten her job and put your hands on her. We have that on the hallway camera, Mr. Wade. All of it. It was only then that the second truth came out. An internal auditor, already investigating irregularities in Ridgeview's billing after an anonymous tip weeks earlier, confirmed what many staff had quietly suspected. Wade had been funneling hospital funds into a private drug trial with forged patient consent forms, chasing a payout from a pharmaceutical partner who paid him personally for enrollment numbers. Danny Reyes, it turned out, wasn't a random gunshot victim. He'd been targeted by men connected to that same trial, men trying to silence him before he could report what he'd seen. One of them was still in the parking lot when security finally moved, armed, desperate, and cornered. It was Grace who spotted him first, recognized the stance before anyone else did, and moved between him and a young nurse near the exit doors. What followed lasted less than 30 seconds. When it ended, the man was restrained and Grace was kneeling beside Danny Reyes's gurney again, checking his pulse, murmuring, 92. Steady. He has a chance, her voice breaking only slightly on the last word, because Danny had been the last man standing beside her the night she lost the rest of her unit, and some debts never fully leave you. Got it, she whispered, and this time, it wasn't a command. It was relief. Preston Wade was arrested within the week. His license to operate any healthcare facility was permanently revoked, and Ridgeview later renamed its emergency wing the Calder Reyes Trauma Center. Grace was formally reinstated, promoted, and given the chance to build something new, a program training combat medics transitioning into civilian nursing, so no one else would have to hide who they were to survive. Old Mr. Henley, discharged and doing well, was the first person she told when the ward was named. He just smiled and said, "Told you I know a soldier's hands. Being underestimated doesn't make you small. It only means the people around you haven't seen what you're capable of yet. The strongest people are rarely the loudest in the room, they're the ones quietly holding it together while everyone else looks the other way." If this story moved you, hit like, subscribe to Silent Heroes so you never miss the next one, and tell us in the comments, what would you have done in that ER? The next story is already waiting. The end.